Hello and welcome to a new episode of Dark Souls Lore. My name is Alex, or Silvermont, and once again we'll be covering Dark Souls 2. But not just one character in today's episode, for if you've played this game you know well that you can't speak about one without the other. Why, like yin and yang, they are contrary forces that complement each other so perfectly. You could liken the pair to Patches and Lautrec from Dark Souls, and I suppose you can throw in Patches and Yurt from Demon Souls too. Do you remember when Lautrec mentioned Patches? Have you heard of trusty Patches? If ever a man has rubbed me up the wrong way, if he ever comes around again, I swear, I'll have his hide. Well, it looks like the relationship of their spiritual successors got rather out of hand. I am, of course, talking about mild-mannered Pate and Creighton the Wanderer. We've got quite a lot to talk about concerning these two rogues. Is Creighton the serial killer Cale suspects him to be, or is Pate the killer? Just who is lying? We'll try and glean some truth, or at least review the evidence, and make some educated guesses. I suppose you could say that this episode is CSI Drangleic. But before we delve into any of that, let's have a look at the names themselves, shall we? Pate, Creighton, and we'll throw Cale in for good measure. Is there anything we can learn from their names? Let's find out. Pate is a tough one. You might find some Latin words or surnames with similar meanings along the lines of son of a noble, a member of the patrician class. Yet that doesn't quite work, as I believe the pronunciation would be markedly different, as it would be with the word pate, which is a meat paste, so no clues there. But hang on a minute. Whilst not strictly speaking a name, the word itself, pate, can be used to mean a person's head. Likewise, in medieval times, it is thought that pate was a nickname for bald people with no hair on their head. Now, remember Patches? What are his defining features? His large hooked nose? Or perhaps more noticeably, his bald head? It goes without saying that Pate is a spiritual successor of Patches, the name, the weapons, the leading us into traps. And indeed, if Pate is a nickname for bald people, well, bear that in mind. As far as I know, it's impossible to tell whether or not Pate has hair under that helm, and how convenient, because being bald is quite distinctive, so hiding it with a helm, well, it's a handy disguise, I suppose. But I'm sure that at some point somebody will manage to get a look at the NPCs without their helms on, but for now, I'm going to assume that Pate is probably bald under his helmet. Moving on to Creighton, and that is a real name too, although it's far more popular as a surname. However, the meanings of it aren't quite as helpful at first glance. A little research tells us that the name is seemingly of Scottish and Old English origin, and the meanings? Well, primarily, border town or from the border, from the creek town, cray for creek and tun for town. Either way, it doesn't seem to hold much relevance, does it? I suppose you could make the connection that it's a Scottish name, and Benhart has a Scottish accent, and Creighton and Benhart both have appropriated garb from Mirror Knights. Benhart, however, is from Jugo, and Creighton claims to be from Mirror. But is he? His accent is a typical working class London East End type, whereas Pate and Cale both affect more high class or posher London accents. It's the West versus East thing ultimately, and although mostly unrelated, one interesting tidbit, Creighton and Magarold share the same voice actor, who is from Bristol, and Magarold has an extremely Bristolian accent, shall we say. Finally, let's quickly go over Cale's name. The most popular of the three by a huge margin. The name, that is, not the actual character. The origin most likely being Hebrew, but Old English is a possibility too. A few meanings. Thin, slender, brave, faithful. None of those seem too relevant, so let's not dwell on that. But there we have them. Pate and Creighton. The higher class rogue that is Pate, and the gruff, abrasive vagrant that is Creighton. One is soft-spoken, mild-mannered, and the other, anything but. And then we also have the seemingly well-born Cale, who leads us to doubt their tale. For Pate is generally whom we would discover first, and after a pleasant enough introduction, he directs us into a trap. By all means, he warns us of the danger, but that doesn't change the fact that he did direct us into a trap. And just who closed the gate that he warns us would shut behind us? I mean, we know that Hollows can close gates from the first Dark Souls, but it would not surprise me if he had some part in that. After all, I'm sure you all remember that bridge in the catacombs that Patches conveniently made to twist around just as we walked over it. Either way, he never directly attacks or even threatens us, whereas Patches will outright attack you if you're a cleric, if I remember correctly after a certain dialogue option. Pate tells us that he was travelling with a man, and he still has the chap's ring after he was trapped. Is he referring to Creighton? Because Creighton himself remarks that Pate wears an unusual ring, and if you wear that ring near Creighton, he will demand that you hand it over to him, and refer to you as a slimy toad if you refuse. In fact, Creighton remarks on that ring no less than 4 times. I am of course speaking about the Ring of Thorns. A ring granted protection by Kreml, god of struggle. The ring's spikes drive into the wearer's skin, so that each blow taken fuels spite towards the perpetrator. When damage is taken, the ring retaliates and inflicts damage upon the enemy. Does the description give us any clues? Well, not really, but, and this is just my opinion, Kreml, god of struggle, would suit Creighton more than Pate. Creighton seems to like the idea of testing his blade, whereas Pate is the very reincarnation of the careful player. He fights with a safe spear and shield. He tries to escape fighting Creighton through words, and he often remarks to us that he prefers a safe approach. And he even uses poison to try and wear his enemies down. Well, dung pies. But Creighton, no shield. He just charges in with an axe. So it seems to me that perhaps the ring belongs to Creighton. Just why he keeps mentioning that it's Pate's though, I'm not sure. However, moving on. After giving us the soapstone, Pate moves to the earthen peak, and along the way there we can find Creighton, trapped in a cell. And once we free him, the story becomes complicated. See, when you free Creighton, he at once warns us of Pate. He tells us that he tried to lay a trap for Pate, after Pate's backstabbing ways became evident, but in the process he trapped himself. He tells us that Pate kills entirely for the pleasure of it, and is a slick talker. But is that true? And that's not all. Moreover, if you speak to Cale after freeing Creighton, he will tell you,
I was born in the land of Mirror. Mirror is also the home of an infamous killer, a knight in name alone. He was locked in the dungeon for multiple murders, but shortly before his execution he managed to escape. And the other day, I saw a fellow with a striking likeness, and then, wait, well, I think he looked rather similar. No, it's true. I saw just such a man, I swear. I believe his name was Cray something. I believe. They shared some resemblance, I think.
And this is where things get complicated. Cale practically accuses Creighton of being a serial killer from Mirror. Creighton accuses Pate of being a murderer, and Pate remarks that Creighton is after him. Cale says that the killer is a knight from Mirror, and Creighton's armor description reads as such. Its design resembles that of the Knight Order in the eastern land of Mirror, but with some odd differences that catch the eye. Perhaps it is a finely crafted imitation. Now, why would Creighton keep wearing the same armor if he knows that he's wanted? And if not, why would he dress up like that, in what may be imitation armor? Is it possible he just didn't have time to change his outfit? And if Creighton and Cale are both from Mirror, why do they have different accents, whereas Pate and Cale share similar accents? Maybe that's just a coincidence. After all, Pate and Creighton's real accents are essentially from different sides of the same urban area, so yes, it's possible that Creighton was a commoner in Mirror who dressed himself as an imitation knight. Coincidentally, that's along the lines of what I believe happens with Lautrec in Dark Souls. I believe he was born a peasant or a commoner, and later rose to become a knight. The fact that all three characters will give you their distinctive outfits could well be added into the mix here, but I genuinely believe that's just a gameplay thing and not relevant lore-wise. Yes, you could say that Pate gives you his armor because he knows someone is after him, and he thinks that if you wear it, Creighton will get you instead, but he doesn't. If you come before Creighton in a perfect Pate cosplay, he won't attack you, but he will ask for the ring. On top of that, Pate is still wearing the same outfit, same with Creighton. They might give you their outfit, but it's not like they suddenly change into something else. And then we have the showdown in Brightstone Cave, Seldora. Both Creighton and Pate claim that the treasure there belongs to them, but will grant you access to it if you help them in the fight. Although both of them will tease how that trapped chest will leave a nice scar, which again doesn't help us figure out much. Either way, when you encounter them, it appears that Creighton has attacked Pate, and the choice of whom to help is solely up to you. Or you can kill both of them, or leave them to it. Pate remarks on his innocence if he survives, whereas Creighton will simply thank you and claim that Pate was no pushover. Something interesting to note, one possible thing that Pate can say when being attacked by the player is "not too shabby." You know who else has that exact same line? The Crestfallen of Firelink Shrine. How strange. On a relevant note though, when killed, Patches in Dark Souls will exclaim, "What did I ever..." So, what do you make of that? Who's telling the truth? Is Creighton the killer that Cale thinks he is? Is Pate the killer Creighton thinks he is? Well, I'll tell you what I think. Pate and Creighton are Patches and Lautrec, who got so involved with screwing each other over that they didn't have the time to screw us over, putting us at somewhat of an advantage. Somewhat like when you invade in the forest and you see the host and a forest invader busy making each other into mincemeat. Or in Dark Souls 2, when you invade and see the host being chased by an Arbiter spirit. So consumed in his desire for revenge, Creighton has no time for us. But what if things had turned out a little different? Well, maybe we'd find the inhabitants of Majula being picked up one by one. When it comes down to it, it's mostly a preference. Who do you prefer? Me? Perhaps I fell for his slick talking, but I can't help but sympathise more with mild-mannered Pate than the bloodthirsty Creighton. But I'll say this much, he has one hell of an axe, and I'd sooner take that into battle than Pate's rather ineffectual spear. How about you? Let me know in the comments, and until next time, thank you so much for watching, and take care.